He was a real gentleman. The type you can't hardly find nowadays, always holding up the doors and putting out your chair. And he was very educated, and he had read a lot and told us many stories about things.
His way to listen was extraordinary.
He's a fantastic person. Very, very gentle in his appearance, in his ways, and very humble. That was the deepest impression of me, how a man of his stature, as it were, of his status, still could be so humble.
And his house the interior was rather interesting, because one part was Western paintings and so forth, and the other part was quite Muslim and Moroccan from the Islamist world.
We counted once, and I don't remember if we ended at 13 or 14 languages which he knew to speak and to read. And I think I have never met anybody that knowledgeable and that skillful in the languages.
And he was interested in big questions, what was happening out in the world. And we were listening to him, and then he asked, what do you think? He got every person to feel good in a way that was extraordinary.
Swedish family, Mohammed Knut Bernström spent his working life as a career diplomat, serving as far afield as Venezuela and Spain. He worked tirelessly as an ambassador to bridge cultures and foster understanding amongst peoples. But these efforts were not enough. Within him was a profound sense that life held something more, and he embarked on a search for the meaning to his existence. His journey would take him to Morocco, where he encountered a traditional Islamic society for the first time, whose impact on him would be life-changing. After retiring from the diplomatic service, he remained in Morocco, where he studied the Quran and undertook the monumental task of interpreting it for a new generation of Swedish Muslims. This selfless act is his enduring legacy to posterity.
Mohammed Knut Bernström is a very interesting man, and he is perhaps typical in some way, but he is very exceptional in other ways. He came from part of Sweden which is called Dalecarlia, and it's generally recognized that the real Sweden is the heartland of Sweden. And he was a Lutheran Christian, but completely, as far as I have understood, uninterested in religion. And that is how we Swedes in general are, because we are members of the Swedish Lutheran Church, and we think that's very good that we have this church, and the better if we don't need to do anything with it. And then he came, he was ambassador, and he came to the Catholic state or country, and then he was interested in religion when he met these Catholics, and he thought that he has had a lot of prejudices about the Catholic Church, and he understood very early that the Catholics were very intellectual, very well educated and very dedicated to their religion. And he was so impressed, so he converted to the Catholic Church.
He was the ambassador in Spain, I think, before he came to Morocco. And he was, I think he was in the Far East as well. And he was the manager of the trade department as well. So, I mean, he was a good diplomat. He was extremely intelligent. So why this change, or if it is changed, I don't know if you can call it a change, but he just told me that he had been a seeker the whole life, really. And, but he was a man of the world before.
He was a seeker. He was seeking not only his religious homeland, so to say, he was seeking proof and news and exactitude all his life. And that was perhaps what made him convert already as a young person to Catholicism. And where he left that religion later on because he felt that the Catholic Church changed in his eyes unwanted way in the 60s.
He said that he had been a Catholic and he had become disillusioned with Catholicism, especially when they decided to do away with Latin as the liturgical language. That was something of, I got the impression that was something of a breaking point for him.
What he searched for in Catholicism was stability. He belonged to a family with both Protestant and Catholic members, and also with ancestry in Germany. So he was, in a way, belonging to several worlds. And then he was disappointed at the time of the Second Vatican Council, where the Catholicism changed very much and did not represent stability anymore. And he searched certainly for something else, and obviously found it during his time as an ambassador, Swedish ambassador in Morocco.
Really, what was the egg and what was the hen here, I can't exactly explain. But I understand that he came on a trip when he was living somewhere else, even I think before his time in Spain, to Morocco, and he was very taken by the country and started with his normal way of being, started to seek the proof, the truth of the country. And it ended with him buying a house in this little town or village.
As far as Knut's time in Morocco is concerned, I would say that I think it influenced him a lot, and it also has to do with his particular type, because he was a very, very humble person, and he was very sort of keen on coming in contact with people. So he was actually looking for people, and I find that that's why, because he was so open-minded to talking to the ordinary people, which is very uncommon among diplomats in Sweden. And that made him see Islam in different light than other diplomats would do. So I think that it was the Moroccan time which actually made him Muslim.
It's a very special type of Islam there, very, very traditional and very, very spiritual. You feel the spirituality of Islam in Morocco all over the place. So many learned people, so many saintly people are living there, teaching, learning. When he got there and when he saw everything and how the people were and the cities and the culture and the religion, it is all one integrated whole. I haven't seen that anywhere else. In Morocco, you still have the old kingdom. So you go straight into Islam, history, living, everything.
وكان عندنا الشاطئ كان يكون ديك الساعات الخوة تماما، باش كنمشي بوحدي نتبع مخالفة. هو لقيت به كيتسالى في الشاطئ، ملي كيتسالى في الشاطئ تكلم معايا باش ولا انا كيعرف الاسبانيا، كيعرف الاسبانيا وكيعرف شويه الاسبانيا ولا كيتكلم بها وكنا نتكلمو كنا ندرسو مع ديالنا. بدأ يزور مدينة العرائش بصفة وقائية كل شهر في كل سنة، وهكذا كنا نمر إلى الشاطئ عبر القوارب التي ترونها من هنا. كنا نأخذ مع بعضنا رأس المناقشات خاصة فيما يتعلق بالشؤون الدينية. كان يحاول فهم الدين في هذا المجتمع البسيط رغم أنه مكون وله ثقافة عالية في الأديان، إلا أنه لم يكن قد تمكن جيدا في الدين الإسلامي حتى حضر إلى العرائش، وهنا تفتحت له الأبواب على مصراعيها لكي يتعلم القرآن الكريم، لأنه كان يتعلم اللغة العربية. وكان هو يعاين مشارق الشمس من هناك من أقصى الجنوب، يعاني. قال لي حينما ترجع الشمس من الأفق إلى القطب الشمالي إلى القطب الجنوبي تمر مرة أخرى من هذا الخط إلى خط الاستواء، وقبل وصولها إلى خط الاستواء كانت كذلك تشرق الشمس على مكة بين يوم 14 و 21 أغسطس. هذه العملية الحسابية فقد تمكن منها من بعض المراكب الفضائية.
كان مازال موجود
الجمعة ليلا ويلتقيه السيد الحارس، يلتقيه في المطار ويأخذه في سيارة أجرة إلى العرائش، يبقى فيها السبت والأحد ليلا يعيده إلى مطار طنجة لكي يستقل الطائرة ويعود إلى مدريد. السيارة يحدث فيها العطب الأول، تنفجر العجلة فيسرقون العجلة. ويكون هو مستعجل جدا لأن يوم الاثنين صباحا سيكون عنده موعد مع ملك إسبانيا، ويكون قلق جدا، ثم يركبون السيارة مرة أخرى فإذا بالعجلة تنفجر مرة ثانية. ويتأكدون بأنه مستحيل أن يصلوا في الوقت. ويقول الحارس السيد كلود يقول له بأن ربما ليس عندك خير في هذا السفر، وهذه الطائرة بالضبط ربما الله تعالى لا يريد أن تركب فيها، ربما ليس عندك فيها خير. فهو يتكلم بقلق ويقول أنا أعرف بأن عندي خير أن أركب هذه الطائرة حتى أصل إلى مدريد وأحضر في الصباح الاجتماع مع الملك.
نعتمد على مقاطعة سبب خبر عاجل يخص الطائرة المنطلقة من مطار طنجة الدولي والمتجهة نحو مطار مدريد. هذه الطائرة
ويبقى قلقا. بعد ساعة تصله الأخبار بأن الطائرة سقطت ومات كل من فيها. تكون هذه الحادثة هي التي ستجعله يتساءل عن القضاء والقدر. في البداية لأنه كان مهتم جدا بقضية القضاء والقدر. مثل هذا الرجل لا يجب أن يموت، مات جسدا ولكنه يجب أن يبقى حيا بأعماله وبآثاره في الحياة وبخدمته لرسالة الحق ورسالة الإسلام.
كان كريما مع الجميع وخاصة لما حفظنا هذه الأسرار وأعطاها كل شيء، وجد فيها أو جعل من الأب والأم إخوة له، وجعل من أبنائهم أبناء له، أعطاهم كل شيء، أعطاهم حبه، أعطاهم رعايته، أعطاهم ما يملكه، أخذ جانبا من البيت وأعطاهم كل شيء، رغم أن الكثير من الناس كانوا يحرضونه إلى حد ما ويخوفونه، ولكن هو رجل عرف هؤلاء بقلبه.
وكان جميع الطبقات تتصل به، فكان هو أيضا يتصل بجميع، لكن كان هو أكثر مني اتصالا بالفقراء، حتى ذلك السفلاء من الشباب الذين لا خلاق لهم ولا حيث منهم يكون سكران وحيث منهم يكون كذا، فكان لا يتطاير منهم ولا يأكلون، كان يضمهم إليه. وحيث كنت أنا أقلق من ذلك، كنت أتغير على شيء يعملوا ديك الشيء بحال اللي كيحسنوا بيا قدام الرجل، كان يبتسم ويبعثني عليهم ويقول لهم خلي، ويخلص عليهم القهوة والمشروبات وكل شيء، وكيعجبوا ديك الطبقة السفلى مرة كان يتكلم معها ويعجبه ويصروا يتصل معهم ويعرف عقلهم ويعرف ولا يبتعد عليهم. ولما كان تأتيني النفس عليه وأقول ما لكم على هذه الأخلاق مع هذا السيد، فكان يبتسم ويقول لي اتركوه، فكانوا يعانقونه ويعرفوا الإنسان أن يجلس بجانبهم، فكان غير عارف في هذه الناحية.
During my time as a civil servant at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, I visited many distant countries, and I experienced that the more I travelled, the more I understood that the human race is one, and that there are no differences. Even in a strange country, with strange concepts, everything made sense.
تعلم اللغة العربية أولا بدافع التشجيع من طرف صديق له في السلك الدبلوماسي، كان يعمل سفيرا للمملكة العربية السعودية في كولومبيا، وبحكم أنه في السفارات عليه أن يتعلم اللغات، وقد كان قد تعلم علاوة على اللغة السويدية الأصلية واللغة الألمانية كذلك الإصلية بأنها لغة أمه، تعلم اللغة الروسية، تعلم اللغة الإنجليزية، ثم تعلم اللغة اليابانية، ثم تعلم اللغة الإسبانية، بحكم أنه سفير في دولة تتكلم باللغة الإسبانية. إذا هذه العلاقات وهذه الحقوق الأحقية في شخصه أجبرته على أن يتعلم اللغة العربية أكثر. أما التفكير والفكر العربي فقد تمكن منه وصار عليه أن يبحث حتى في العلوم القرآنية، ذلك أن زيارته إلى هذه المكتبة بالعرائش كان يتطلع دائما لدراسة أولا النحو واللغة العربية ومحاولة التعلم النطق في الشوارع، فكان يعشق ويتأمل بأن يكون ممثلا للسويس في أي دولة عربية أو دولة مسلمة كي يتطور فكره في اللغة العربية، وفعلا تمكن بين سنة 77 فما فوق بأن يكون ممثلا أو يسعى أن يمثل دولة السويس في المغرب.
And having completed his term in Spain, he could have been sent to any other country like Germany or England or even to Russia, because he could, I think he knew some Russian also. But he asked himself, it was on his proposal that he came to Morocco.
God says that when that day comes, all those who have deserved paradise will enter paradise, and all those who have deserved hell shall enter hell. And then God says to the angels, enter hell again, and bring forth everyone in whose hearts there existed as much as a mustard seed of faith or goodness. These people will be taken up and thrown into the river of life.
من مظاهر تقربه إلى اعتناق الإسلام كان حريصا دائما على أن تكون جل محادثته ومناقشته تتعلق بالإسلام وبالشرائع وبالأحكام. كانت دوافع باطنية لا نشعر بها، لأنه كان معتنقا فعلا للإسلام قبل اعتناقه رسميا. من بين السلوك الذي كان يتصرف به أنه قبل دخوله كسفير للمغرب كان حريصا على حضور وتتبع دروس الحسنية. وفي أحد الأيام من شهر رمضان الدكتور المرحوم برحمة الله بالعيش طبيب الخاص صاحب الجلالة سوله أو أسأله وقال لماذا أنت على نحيل الجسم بنوع من الكناية، فانتظر قرابة دقيقة ثم أجابه وقال له لأنني صائم. أنت ركع ضاحكا مبتسما قال ولما تصوم؟ وأنا دكتور ربما ننصحك بعمل الصيام لأن ضعف الجسم. ثم انتظر قليلا قالوا أنا أصوم عن عقيدة. قالوا كيف عن عقيدة؟ قالوا عن عقيدة أصوم. قالوا وما دافعك أو ما حجتك في هذا الموضوع؟ قال له لأنني رأيت منشورا فيه يقول في حديث قدسي كل عمل بني آدم له إلا الصوم فإنه لي وأنا أجزي به. فهل أنا من بني آدم أم لست ببني آدم؟ فالصيام هو المفروض على بني آدم، وهذا ما الصيام كله عادة فأنا أصوم كونه عمل لله والله هو الذي يجزي به. فكانت هذه هي بداية تحقيق بأنه كان مسلما في الباطن.
He didn't convert to Islam till he was retired from the foreign ministry. So I think it was just in his heart to the beginning, and then when he had retired, he converted.
He had converted in his heart long before that, much longer before that. But in a way, he was 100% diplomat, and for 100% Swedish diplomat, we don't talk a lot, they don't talk a lot about religion. They seem to be unpolitical, very much neutral. And an ambassador is not known, a Swedish ambassador is not known to be either Muslim or Catholic, but they don't talk about religion.
I am sure that the minister would never have said no. And he told me that, you know, Cecilia, I have come home when I found Islam. And he found it balanced in his life through Islam. That was the right thing for him. It was no struggle within him. He knew that this is right for me. And I found my way. I can't say I regarded him as a holy man, but around him was a sort of aura, you say aura of belief, can you say that? So I think really he came home, and it was quite easy for him, because he found the answers, or the answers to his questions. He was a real believer without a lot of, you can't shake hands with women and so forth, nothing of that. He was religious, he was really a religious, truly a religious man. And I admired him a lot because he found peace in his religion.
المملكه السعوديه الاوروبيه قالوا كيفاش كتخاصم لي ماكسي كتبغي هذا كيفاش زرعك تحاول تحول ديال 180 درجه. فكرت ذلك حتى تطور وانا عرفتي لكن عارف راسي وفعلا وصلت واحد القوه باطنيه عندي من الصغور ديالي هي اللي كتفعلوا مع السياق. عرفت كيف واحد الحاجه اللي هي داخليه كيفاش دابا يعاودني ديال الحدث. قال لي انا في 1923 مع 24 ما بقيتش عاقله بالضبط هو خلق 1919 و 1923 كان هو الوليد ديالو في السياره لانه راجعين واحد الحفل ديال التزلج في السماء الاسود ونعود عليه واحد الصوت تاع الرجل مات الوليد ديالو بالليل بحال هكا ولقاه ميت في قدامه. حسب ما كان يحكي لي قد تعرض لحادثة قتل في السيارة سقط عليه الثلج مع منتصف الليل وظل في السيارة في ذلك البرد القارس وأبوه ميتا في البرد. بينما هو هناك في تلك الحالة كان يرى شخصا معينا كأنه روح إنسان وإنسان على صورة إنسان بالروح ولكن أين هو؟ لا وجود له. رغم ذلك ظلت ذاكرته وخياله ينتظر دائما ذلك الرجل كأن ذلك الحدث هو عين أمر ما للمستقبل أي أن هذا ظل مؤثرا تأثيرا كبيرا على حياته دائما. وصار كذلك من هذه الحالة في حوار مع الأديان وكان يتحاور مع دينه الباطني منذ سنوات ونحن لا نعرف حقيقة عمره.
Everything good comes from God, but there is also evil in the world, and because God is the only creator, the evil must come from his creation, and that is precisely what the Quran says. For me, it was like a veil lifting in front of me when I saw it written in plain terms.
أنه في إطار بحثه كان توقف عند فكرة الخير والشر وعن الجن وأراد أن يعرف موقف الإسلام والمسلمين من الخير والشر ومن الجن يعني بالضبط الشر كان يركز عن الشر هل هو من خلق الله هل هو من الله كما أن الخير من الله. وجدت نفسي أمام رجل مسيحي متميز لأن العادة أن المسيحيون يكونون متشبثين جدا بمسيحيتهم ويعتبرون ما دونها كفر. فوجدت نفسي امام رجل مغاير تماما رجل متشبث جدا بمسيحيته ويعتبر على انها هي تامره بان يبحث عن مسلي للاحزان مفرج للكره معزي. وفي الترجمه التي اعطاني اياها كان يسمى بالكونسولاتور. فمن خلال نقاشي معه أشار لي إلى نقطة مهمة بحيث أرجعني إلى إنجيل يوحنا. أنا سأقرأ عليك تلك الفقرات التي أثرت فيه وأثرت فيها أيضا. لماذا أقول أثرت فيها أيضا؟ لأنني إلى حدود تلك الساعة التي تعرفت عليه فيها كنت في الحقيقة أعتبر كما يعتبر الكثير من المسلمين على أن الإنجيل ليس هو الكلام الذي أوحى الله عز وجل إلى عيسى وأنه شيء محرف إلى فكنا لا نعتبره. لكن هذه الفقرات التي قرأها علي جعلتني أذكر قول الله عز وجل سبحانه وتعالى لأنه أصلا كان مؤمنا بالله عز وجل سبحانه وتعالى لأن الشيء الذي أضافه هنا هو أن يعتبر أن محمدا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم هو النبي الخاتم وكأنه هذا الكونسولاتور الذي بشر به الذي يبشر به عيسى، كما تطابق ذلك ما جاء في القرآن في سورة الصف. أنه وصل إلى الإسلام من خلال المسيحية، بمعنى يعني من هذا المنطلق هذا هو بالضبط في الإنجيل ديال يوحنا، وعرفه بقلبه وبروحه لأنه أحب الله عز وجل وأحب رسوله حبا عجيبا جدا، وهذا الحب انعكس على أخلاقه وآدابه، فأصبح يحب الناس جميعا ويحب خلق الله سبحانه وتعالى جميعا، بحيث كان رقيقا في إحساسه. يعني كثيرا ما تراه يعني خاشعا في قراءته دامعة عيناه في بعض اللحظات اللي كتكون في الحقيقة لحظات ديال التأثر. هذا أمر كذلك بحكم أنه أنا كنظن نعتبره ربما أصدق سفير على وجه الأرض، هذا نعتبره أصدق سفير على وجه الأرض.
I think that if you have lived long enough and experienced wonders many times, you realize that wonders happen even if you don't understand their wonders. You always get confirmation that there is something, like you say in Sweden, that there is something that governs, something that guides everything.
فأحب أن يصل هذا النور إلى بيت كل سويدي، فجند نفسه ما تبقى من عمره ويوصل كلمة الله عز وجل إلى كل بيت سويدي.
Knut Bernström, he had the initiative. I don't remember if it was a telephone call first or a letter first, but it has to do with his idea of a new interpretation of the Quran into Swedish. And he asked me if I thought it would be a good idea. And I remember that I answered no, because we had already translations. But I changed my mind when I saw what he has done. I saw that what he intended was not really a translation, but an interpretation.
He told me that he had been thinking about to do this before, even because he was a Muslim before he stopped being an ambassador. But he was this in secret. This is what he told me. He said he was thinking, when I retire, I'm going to translate the Quran to Swedish. It was his wish from his innermost. And he was a very intellectual person. He told me when he was living with his daughter-in-law in Morocco, he was sitting in his office all the time and he was working, and then she was asking him to come down and take his meal, and he was going down taking his meal, and he was going up again, and he was studying in his study. So he was a very intellectual person, and he was a person who wanted to work with his intellect.
Purpose of translating the Quran into Swedish was to make it accessible in Swedish to all people who use Swedish as a language, not only ethnical Swedes, but of all Swedes. And I thought maybe also again a reaction on the previous most common translation, which was of literally very high standard, but was not a very good way of portraying how Muslims understand the Quran.
We had early translations already in the 18th century, or bits of the Quran,
But the first complete translation was of Thunberg in the 18th century, and then came Zettersten. And his translation is really very, very good. And I have heard many people say that it is one of the best in any European language.
The old translation that we had here in Sweden, it was from 1917. And the professor that translated it, for scholars, it is very popular because he was very true to the original in a way. But he copied the language of the Bible edition from 1916, a sort of very high-level, old-fashioned, archaic language, which is practically incomprehensible for people these days.
It was made by a professor of Uppsala, and he was a very clever scholar, and he knew Arabic very well. But he lived in a time in the beginning of the 20th century when we had what Edward Said has called the Orientalist mood. He thought Muslims are very contemptible. He pitied the Muslims who had this superstitious and old religion. And he wrote an introduction to his translation, which is full of prejudices. So he has written that this is free fantasies from a sick man. It's very an interesting book, or something like that. And when the Muslims came to Sweden in the 1980s, and they asked for a Swedish translation of the Quran, they perhaps began to read the introduction, and then they were very scared and think, what is this?
In the 1960s and 70s, there was a rather huge immigration of labor force from Yugoslavia and from Turkey, especially from Anatolia, which meant that there became a kind of Muslim presence. Later on, in the 80s and 90s, has been refugees, which means that there is a Muslim presence where we can see now the second, third, even the fourth generation, which means that this is part of the normality in Sweden. And today we have this debate due to the Islamophobia in Europe, which has also certain exponents in Sweden.
It has been quite a shock for the Swedes to find in the middle of our secularized society, where you will find very few really believing Christians, you suddenly have people who pray 5 times a day and who really go to the mosque and who can't live without religion, and who in everything they do and say show that they belong to this religion, and that worries people. What is this? And since most people don't bother about their own religion any longer, they don't even have that. I think that it's easier for a believing Swedish Christian to have an approach to Islam and to understand Islam than it is for a secularized Swede who has never taken an interest in his own religion. So we are all very, very grateful when Kurt banned Ström, just at the time when Islam became a very important social factor in Swedish life, took upon himself the task that nobody had asked him to do, to translate, one could say, the Quran.
كان يريد أن يبلغ القرآن اللغة السويدية على أساس الفهم وليس الكلام، أي بمعنى الروح الكلام في القرآن. لقد تمكن من معرفة أن القرآن لا يمكن ترجمته ترجمة مرضية، تمكن من معرفة هذه الحقيقة. إذا ترجمة القرآن كانت بد من ترجمة إما معنوية أو بمعنى باطنية، لأن القرآن يتضمن روح النص. هذا الروح لا يمكن لأي إنسان أن يعبر عنه بأي ثقافة.
Even the title of the translation of the Quran, the message of the Quran, Quran's budskap, indicates that he wasn't after trying to make a literal translation of the Quran. The idea was to portray the message. What is God saying here?
When you read it now, you feel it in your heart. And his commentary also makes it possible for beginners to understand more about what the ayats mean. And he doesn't call it the Quran, he calls it the meanings of the Quran. It's like it's not a translation, it's like he's showing one aspect of it.
I regard his version more as, shall we call it, a sermon, preaching over the words.
And the importance of that translation, because it came just at the time when Sweden was beginning to have immigrants from Muslim countries. It's because the immigrants were not Arabs, so they didn't know the Quran in Arabic, and here they could not get it either in their local languages. Here they had everything was to be in Swedish, and here they had suddenly the Quran in Swedish in front of them with his commentaries, which has been very important for people from Bangladesh or India or Pakistan or Indonesia, countries where in any case one could not understand the Quran in Arabic. And it was also very important that he added his commentaries, and it was not his own commentaries. He took the commentaries from Muhammad Assad. Muhammad Assad was a converted Muslim. He was really a Jew called Leopold Weiss. I read his book, The Road to Mecca, when I was very young, and he had a really deep understanding of, as many converts do, very deep understanding of Islam and the Quran. And he has commented the Quran, and Bergström has made use of his comments. It has the Quranic language on the upper right-hand page, and then it has the translation, and then it has about half the page of commentaries. And that is, of course, very, very instructive. And his explanation in the introduction are so simple and so good that it will help not only the immigrants, but also Swedes can suddenly have an entrance to understanding the Quran.
From the beginning, Knut had a clear vision of how he would present the text. Knut was typing every letter in his little computer down in Morocco, and he sent us diskettes. We had to think of the Swedish language. The translation should suit the young Muslims in Sweden, often immigrants in second generation. Several people read it, and many small things had to be discussed. All the discussion about the meanings of some of the words, and if it wasn't better to change all one word to another.
He doesn't use the word book for kitab, for instance. He says it's the revelation. The God's revealed words, he said, so that one understands that, because there were no books in those days.
1917 interpretation, when it was talking about qawama, the verse which is very problematic. Rijal, the men are the head of the head or above the woman. It's Rijal Qawamun al-Nisa. So what is the meaning of Qawamun? So in 1917, it was actually saying in a very sort of power terms that the man has the power over woman. Whereas Knut, because he was a Muslim, and because his translation was much later, it was in a time where there was a very different view of the gender relation. So he was using a totally different term. He was talking about that the men are responsible for women. So, and then he explained it. And this was, I find it was really a difference. So that's why I think Knut's translation is very, very important.
رغم كبر سنه وما الفترة التي أمضاها بين إسلامه ووفاته 13 سنة عالم على أن شمس عمره بدأت تؤول إلى الغروب وعرف على أنه يسابق الزمان ولهذا وصل الليل بالنهار يعني ما كان ينام إلا قليلا واضعا نصف عينيه أن يتم هذا المشروع لكي لا تفاجئه الموت فكان ينام من الليل إلى الساعتين 3 ساعات 4 ساعات على أقصى تقدير وجمع وقته كان يمضيه على كرسيه وعلى مكتبه باحثا دارسا علما على أن صعوبة الأمر أنه ما كان يترجم فقط من الإنجليزية إلى السويدية بل كثيرا ما كان يتوقف عند الترجمة لأنها كانت بعض المرات لا يفهم المقصود فيمضي الشهور طوال إما في النقاش معي أو في النقاش مع الأستاذ استقرار أو في النقاش مع السي عبد الواحد أو مع كل من يلمس فيه على أن يستطيع أن يفيده بعض المرات يمضي في الآية الشهور طوال لكي يضعها بالأسلوب المناسب لأنه كيعرف على أن التعبير القرآني يجب أن يكون تعبيرا باللغة العربية والترجمة بالمعاني يحاول جهد الإمكان أن يقترب من المعنى العربي فكان يعني مخلصا في ترجمته إلى أقصى الحدود.
مع أنه قد ترجم القرآن ما أكثر من 20 مرة أكثر من 20 مرة كلمة القرآن. يظهر بأن الإسلام أو القرآن خاصة في القرآن يظهر بأن فيها معاني وأسرار ابتداء من هذه المرحلة لديك يعرف بأن القرآن علامة على الخطاب كذلك بأن مضمون الكلام لابد له من أسرار باطنة نورانية التي الإنسان يعرف من الإحساس ما نقولش من العقل ديالو يحس بأن هذا النص القرآني زيادة على الإبداع الفني أو البياني فيه شي حاجة زايدة كيقول لي هكا وفعلا الفرق ملي كيمشي للإلحاد وكيجي كيف ما الرسول حصل هذا تقول لي القرآن ليس نص كلامي يقول لي نص كلامي ليس أما هو نص روحي نوراني. إذا القرآن في الحقيقة كيتعرف بالقلب أكثر من العقل، العقل يطابق الواقع ويقبلوك أكبر درجة في العلم هذا في الثقافة العالم يقول أكبر درجة العلم هو القلب أكثر من العقل لأنها لا تعمل الأبصار ولكن تعمل القلوب التي في الصدور القلب ما يمكنش يتعمل كيف يتعمل ما كيشوفش إذا صيغة خطابية ديال القلب كيشوف ما عندناش كيشوف هذا كيشوف بالنور ما كيشوفش بالبصر الحسي. إذا معنى ذاك يتجاوز هذه المرحلة لأن كيشوف القرآن بالبصر النوراني أو بالنسبة يسمى في العلم العبادة بالبصيرة. البصيرة ليست هي البصر لأن البصر كتكون أشياء مادية والبصيرة كتكون أشياء بديهية العقلية الروحية.
much working in the spirit of the Swedish painter and artist Ivan Ageria, who had this idea about trying to combine the best Western thought with the best of Islam.
There is written once in the Quran, when you discuss with Jews and Christians, to be very silent. Don't try to persuade them with any hard arguments. And I have got the impression that he thought in that way.
I will sum it up in this way. For the old generation of immigrant Muslims, the Quran meant recitation of a text that they did not understand. I remember a Pakistani girl was being mentioned by one of my students here. He asked her, have you read the Quran? Yes, she said, it took me 3 years, but now I have finished it. And he asked her, did you find some verses especially interesting? Oh, she said, I did not understand it, I can't Arabic. But now, with this interpretation of Islam, I can see among young believing Muslims that they are interested in the content, the meaning of the text, not only its recitation.
مثل هذا الرجل لا يجب أن يموت، مات جسدا ولكنه يجب أن يبقى حيا بأعماله وبآثاره في الحياة وبخدمته لرسالة الحق.